It has been a long road and full of challenges. Being bilingual on graduation day has been one of my greatest achievements because I now have the tool set to go on reaching all the objectives I might set for myself in the future. A world of opportunities opened up to me when I started studying with Richmond Solution. I was really able to learn autonomously. I could study at home, in the library, or in the classroom. I could dive into the book, or by being connected to the internet, I could explore fascinating activities that empowered my English skills. I was able to instantly access the answers as they were only a click away. I loved working in a team. My friends and I had great fun as we learned. I learned a lot from them, and I know that they learned something from me. The exams were always challenging, but thanks to the practice that was constantly available on the digital platforms, we were fully up to speed to meet these challenges. I am really going to miss my school.
Richmond Solution helped us hugely to transform the English program in our school. we have now got the best tools to guarantee the best learning. Let me show you. Part of the process gives us access to a coach who builds our confidence, as well as training courses to better our abilities and to continue our improvement. Yes, good teachers are always keen to learn more. As we live in the cloud, as we say in this connected world, we have digital resources to improve our classes and which allow our students to learn from anywhere in the world, even quite literally in the clouds if they are on board an airplane. Through the Richmond Test Manager and Learning Analytics, we have a variety of possibilities to test, validate, and monitor students' progress. It is amazing to be able to see how your students are learning and to have the evidence of their learning at your fingertips. This really does make us very happy indeed. Richmond Solution is a solution designed for you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Andres Guerrero. I'm the Academic Director of Richmond Santillana. It's a pleasure to be with you in our first Richmond Week, which has as main purpose to provide you with professional development on a wide variety of topics that are very up-to-date and can be very interesting to to your current teaching practice. So you're welcome. This is the first of six sessions that we're going to have during the week, and I will be telling you a little bit more about them in a minute. Before we start our session today, I'd like you to share with you your hashtags, hashtag Richmond Week, for you to comment and ask the questions that you have that you'd like to share with our speaker, Paul Seligson, in a minute. Our other hashtag, which is Joy of Teaching. And of course, we would like to invite you to register to our Richmond Week website, which is richmondweek.com, so you can register and access a wide variety of articles, videos, and today at 7 p.m., our bilingual edition of Ruta Maestra that has a lot of very interesting articles, very current, and in these times of hybrid learning, very powerful, and hopefully can give you many ideas that you could use in your classrooms. I'd like to welcome all the school administrators and teachers that join us not only from Colombia, but from different countries all over Latin America, Chile, Argentina, Peru, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, and some other countries. It's time to begin our session, and it is a pleasure for me to introduce one of our dearest friends in Richmond, Colombia, Paul Seligson. Paul has been TEFLing for more than 40 years and is well known globally for his lively, highly practical approach. An MA in TEFL, CELTA assessor, and Trinity moderator, his many publications include Helping Students to Speak for Richmond Teachers Handbook Series, which he also edits, English File with Oxford University Press, and Kids Web for Richmond. His most recent publications are English ID and Identities Second Edition, which is fully digitalized and is a great thing nowadays, as I said earlier, in these digital times and where hybrid learning is taking a very important position in our schools. Those are two innovative English courses for young adults written specifically for Latin American learners, and I'm sure that Paul is going to share with us some other information about these wonderful courses in a minute. Paul is based in England, and he's delighted to be returning virtually to Colombia, one of his favorite places on earth. Paul, thank you very much for being with us, especially because it's very late in England, and welcome.
Thank you, Andres. Thank you, everybody, for coming along. It's a very strange experience, isn't it? All this online stuff. I wish with all my heart I was in your continent now, but for various reasons we all know, and it cannot be. So thank you from Chile to Mexico, all of you for coming along today, and I'll try and make it as entertaining and useful as I can. On the screen now you can see what I'm going to talk about, which is early fluency. And best practice in Latin America. And if you read through that quickly, you'll see my belief, and I'll try and justify that during the session. Basically, Colombian learners, any Latino, whether you're in El Salvador, Chile, or wherever you're from, you should learn to get fluent to a good level, at least B1 plus, much faster than most other nationalities. And if that's not happening, then we need to ask ourselves why. And hopefully today I'll give you some reasons. If you have any questions or anything, please fire them at Andres. I'm happy to try to pause and try and accommodate what you've said. If the questions are too difficult, I'll give them straight back to Andres. Okay, guys, let's go. So they have the most similar 10 languages to English, according to the US Department of State, are on your screen. And all of them, surprisingly, are Romance languages, apart from the first two and the Scandinavian languages. A lot of teachers think that German or Dutch sorry, German is perhaps nearer to English, but the Romance languages are the most similar languages. And if you speak one of the 10 languages on the screen, you really should learn English faster than other nationalities. Knowing Spanish is an absolutely huge advantage to our learners if we approach the teaching learning scenario in an appropriate way. Okay. Quick questions for you. Which could you choose the correct answers in those three statements? 48% or 58% of English is Latin based, a quarter or a third, and over half or over 2/3 of English sounds exist in Spanish. I'll give you a few seconds. Just choose, at least mentally. You can type in the answers if you wish to on a piece of paper, or just to yourself or with a colleague if you're lucky enough to be watching with somebody else. Okay, here we go. I'll give you the answers. It's 58% of English is Latin based, which is a huge advantage, particularly obviously lexically. A third, 1 in 3 of the most common words are cognates, and over 2/3 of English sounds exist in Spanish. Certainly if you include international Spanish, the j from Argentina and so on, most of the sounds which exist in English are also existent in Spanish. And again, you're not coming at English from the point of view of a Korean learner or an Arabic learner who has far more difficulties with pronunciation, at least assimilating the sounds. The grammar is very similar. Yes, I know word order, yes, the present perfect, yes, phrasal verbs. We know the difficult things, but actually I think it's more similar than different. And often students, when you ask students, what's your greatest difficulty with English, they say the grammar. And I immediately respond like this: look at English. Yeah. 5 forms. Happy Christmas, it's easy peasy. And then look at Spanish. Get out of here. There's something like 56 forms. Okay, so thank God you should be telling yourself that you speak Spanish. It's so much easier for you to learn English rather than to learn Spanish from this position. Imagine how difficult it's been for me over the years to assimilate all of those forms. And really what I want to do is instill in the learners the idea, thank God we speak Spanish, it's our big advantage. Not suppress it, but show them all the ways they can celebrate what they already know. It will help them to get fluent in English if we use an appropriate approach. Okay, just a couple more things. Mental translation is unavoidable. Every early low-level student will translate, come what may. But in our case, translation is much more helpful than it is perhaps to an Asian or an Arabic learner. And our students, an A1 Latino is a much higher level than an A1 Asian or Russian or Arabic student, and yet we give them the same dose. It seems to me we need to accept that our students can read well above the level of other learners because of the familiar language, much of it from Latin. They can also guess, and they can express a lot adequately using cognates, similar language. So I think for years and years we've been sort of trying to box everybody as A1, A2, B1, B2, which is a nonsense in many ways. And unfortunately, the Common European Framework doesn't really accommodate all the advantages which our students have. So my argument is that Latinos should learn English much faster than most because of the advantages, but they won't if our course books and materials and approach ignores them and gives them the international lo de siempre. Okay, so another question for you. What most impedes, another cognate, impedes, impedir, early fluency? What holds back our students from getting fluent? Anybody like to type in a couple of ideas or perhaps shout them out to Andres? What holds back Latino students from getting fluent? Any answers come through?
Well, some of our teachers are saying that difference in pronunciation, for example, since Spanish is a phonetic language and English is not, so some of them are afraid of mispronouncing words.
Okay.
Some others are saying that sometimes lack of language exposure. Brian Vallejo is saying as well.
Okay.
Liliana Bueno says fear of speaking.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So all of those I'll cover. Thank you very much, guys. I would say the two big ones are lack of practice in and out of class. Obviously, that's changing now because it's so much easier now to practice online, for example. But I'm really focusing on teens and adults, part-time language learning, and primarily lack of vocabulary. That's what holds you back. If you have a few words, you can express yourself. But our students have far greater vocabulary than most other learners if we press the right buttons. If we ignore what they know, then we hold them back. But let me show you what I mean. For example, what do you teach beginners on day one? In most Latin American countries, they get the verb to be yet again. And most Latinos who come to a language course, start a new language course, have a tattoo of the verb to be already. I am, are you, who cares, on their arms. But they can't say anything. So what I teach them is the following. On day one, I teach them this chunk. I think Lady Gaga is, or the Beatles are, for example, plus an adjective. Then on the screen, I'll throw 13 adjectives onto the board or onto the screen if I'm teaching online, and just say, okay, start talking, guys. And they can say, immediately they can express their opinion. They don't have to go through this, what does this mean, what does this mean? They know the meaning because I'm choosing words which are familiar. And that's the secret to early fluency, giving them words which are Happy Christmas from the beginning. On day two, I teach them, I think X is, an, plus adjective plus noun, immediately addressing that big word order problem, and a plural are plus noun plus s. So for example, by the end of the class, the students can say, I think Cartagena is a marvelous colonial city. Or I think the bars and restaurants in El Poblado, in Medellin, are fantastic. Okay, so immediately they can express their opinion. And I think a lot of what holds students back is they're not really saying what they want to say. They can't really be themselves, their Latino selves in English. What I'm trying to do is put the words into their mouths. Of course, they may say marvelous or whatever they're going to say, but once the words are in their mouths and coming out, then we can polish. And we can't polish what they don't say. And as some of you said, it's fear that holds them back. Fear of mispronunciation, perhaps, but when you give them help with the word stress, they can guess and adjust that little bit more quickly. Okay, so that's my suggestion. Whenever you're teaching at any level, if you want to develop greater fluency, throw in relevant cognates, put them on the board, on the screen, however you wish, and the students can immediately express more than other learners because these words are so similar and easy for them compared to others, particularly if you help them with word stress, as I always do. This is what it looks like in my new book. I have to talk about the book a little bit because Richmond are sponsoring this event, but also because I'm proud of it. It's the only course book written specifically for Latin Americans. This is what it looks like in the book. On the left there, you have the adjectives which they're learning, and you'll see there's a couple of extra ones, amazing and cool. Amazing is there, and the students have to classify them between which are positive, neutral, or negative. Amazing is there because in every lesson, I have a song, an authentic song, just a little extract there. When I see your face, you're amazing. You know the song. I'm not going to ruin your evening or my evening, your afternoon by singing for you. But by the end of the class, if you look at the bottom there, the students can say, Chichen is a Mayan city in Mexico. It's an amazing place. Lady Gaga is an American musician. I think she's ridiculous, etc., etc., etc. So that's after one class, your students can distinguish their own personal tastes and personality, and learn about each other from the very beginning, rather than the typical thing. Are you Colombian? Yes, teacher. What's your favorite city? Medellin, teacher. It's all far too locally focused, and they're not really exchanging genuine information. If you look at the first page of the book, you'll see there, that's just to give you an idea of what it's like. When somebody it was in Mexico recently, last year, said to me, Paul, in your book, the famous people are actually famous in Latin America. So many of the materials we use famous people who our Latino students have never heard of. And then if you look at the choice of adjectives I'm using, then we've got Argentinian, Brazilian, Colombian, Indian, Chilean, and Ecuadorian, just in the first lesson. So it's very clearly entirely focused on our continent. And my message to the students is always, because you all speak Spanish, I can help you learn to express yourself in English a lot faster. I don't think of Spanish as the enemy. On the contrary, it's the best friend they have. I'll come back to this a little bit later on. But I hope you get the idea of what my material looks like. It does look and feel, and is for Latin America. What's more motivating than that? When the students, es lo mismo, es casi lo mismo, hallelujah. But the most motivating thing is when something is easy and the students can be successful quickly. These are my messages to the students. Thank God we speak Spanish. Similarities are fabulous. Contrasting is both inevitable and extremely useful in our case, because so often you find things which you can use immediately. Just to show you what I've done, in the first two lessons of the book, the course book, you have 83 cognates. There they are on the screen there. Those in the first two lessons, they meet all of those cognates. And all of those words, your students, with a little help with pronunciation, which is the first impediment which you mentioned, they can immediately start to say things. Of course, if they say posible, you draw attention to the stress. No, it's possible. Look at the stress, try and say it. And they might say possible. And that's an improvement. And little by little, we can polish, because they're speaking. You cannot polish what they don't say. Colombian is there, of course, and so are many of the nationalities of you here, Chilean, Ecuadorian, I can see there. There are 500 cognates in units 1 to 5, 1,000 cognates in level 1. Okay, so for every level, at 4 levels, you get 1,000 cognates, which most course books pretend to teach 1,000 words per level. I'm giving you 1,000 cognates per level, plus all the new frequent vocabulary, which is not cognate based, which is always included in level 1. So obviously our students are going to be exposed to more English, which they can use and generate that fluency much more quickly. I just underlined there, look, plurals. I mean, we don't need to really teach plurals. Yes, the spelling of nationalities. Yes, children. There are 1 or 2 exceptions, but the plurals for our students, Happy Christmas. It's so easy. So we don't need to spend time on plurals, because the students can pick them up really, really quickly. With other nationalities, you have to give a whole class on plurals because it's so different from what they do. So again, what we're giving our students in the past so often hasn't been designed to take advantage of what they already have. At this point, I just want to draw attention to a key thing. Teens and adults don't learn languages like children. Colombia bilingüe, now there's so much talk about bilingüe. You cannot assimilate a second language without making reference to a first language, and a third language without making reference to a second or first language. It's simply impossible. But with teens and adults in particular, it is not our job to try and simply teach through immersion, try to compensate for the fact that they weren't children in an Anglophone country. Our job is quite different. Our job, we have to compensate for the fact that they haven't had years and years and years and years of exposure, and get them confident and believing and motivated and successful from the beginning. Otherwise, in my experience, most Latinos give up, or have given up in the past, before they get anywhere near a B1 level, which is a tragedy to my mind, because it shouldn't be so difficult. And that's our context. We teach monolingual, Spanish-speaking, part-time, mixed motivation classes. Some students love English, and some don't. Okay, so we have to remember this. We're not trying to imitate the United States or Britain or Canada or Australia. We're trying to create something very artificial as fast as we possibly can. back to you guys. I've given you 5 little sentences. They're all facts. I want you to guess the numbers or the missing items. What percentage of the world's English conversations do not involve a native speaker? What type of English is generally the hardest to understand and produce, etc.? I'll give you 30 seconds just to go through there. 3 is a level within the Marco, the Common European Framework. If any of you would like to type your guesses or your answers, or perhaps you know the answers, just type them and Andres can give me any feedback.
I'll be your voice teachers. Well, let's see what they're saying. While they type their answers, just remember the 2 hashtags that we're going to use throughout their session. Hashtag joy of teaching, hashtag Richmond Week, and do not forget to register richmondweek.com to access all very interesting information. So we're waiting for teachers to go over some of their answers. So number 2, Irish English is generally the hardest to both understand and produce.
Some people say
Paul Garcia says that.
Some people say drunken Scottish English.
They're probably right.
Yeah. Okay.
This is A2. Yeah, Paul, please.
A2 level, really? Wow, that's a bit low. Anyway, here are the answers. These are all facts, remember. These are not my opinion. These are all facts. 85% don't involve a native speaker, okay? So it's official. You know, I am a dinosaur. Most of the English conversations globally now don't involve native speaker. So why do we obsess so much with native English when it's not even the majority English? Native English is generally the hardest both to understand. So Irish would be a form of native. Learners can't think in English until at least a C1 plus level. Some people argue it's C2. Some people argue it's never. How many Colombians get to C1? How many Colombians or any Latino country? It's very rare that students get to that level. They are the minority. And most students don't need to get to that level. Most students who want to work in a telephone exchange or pass an exam just need B1 or B2. So the idea that they have to get into the state where they can be immersed and think in English is far away from most people's reality or possibility, let's be honest. 90 to 95% of English teachers globally are non-natives. So as I said, it really is, you know, I am a dinosaur. It's true. Okay. Sadly true. Most are effectively bilingual. So most teachers are teaching monolingual classes whose language they know. And it's a huge advantage to confect more locally relevant classes, but only again if we make the right pedagogical choices in terms of priority, goal, and activity. If we give them lo de siempre, we're ignoring all the opportunities and advantages they have. Other changes, the world is changing, obviously, and COVID is having a tremendously powerful change impact, but the world of pedagogy is changing. We're not any longer trying to get near native competence. When you talk about Colombia bilingüe, you're not trying to create little native speakers. You're trying to create effective, interactive communicators in English as a lingua franca. Sure, some people, perhaps very young children, can aspire to sounding native-like, but the vast majority is using English for operational lingua franca purposes, ELF. In the past, and I've taught some of you in the past, we were obsessed, you know, only English, no Spanish, I have a gun, stand back, it's a crime. You know, monolingual teaching only through English. And now we're globally, obviously in Colombia, but the rest of the world too, we accept it's a bilingual process. And we're talking ever more about translanguaging, which is very close to my heart. What do I mean by translanguaging? The deployment of a speaker's full linguistic repertoire. So your body language, you can see I use that a lot, your intonation, and then all the words which you think other people might recognize from your mother tongue, in other words, cognates, and using all one's language resources to achieve communicative goals. It's not simply linguistic, it's metalinguistic, it's everything that we've got, we use and can do. That's what translanguaging is all about. And that, I think, now is very high on most people's agendas. Another definition here, just to help you, going above and beyond our standard separation of languages and working things out with, between and through the two languages, Spanish and English. So it's Spanish-based second language learning, because that's where they're beginning. It's your starting point. Your mother tongue is your starting point. And there's another one here. With my knowledge, my favorite quotation, this is from Li Wei. She says, with my knowledge of L1 and L2 together, I'll get here. I'll express what I want to do. I'll be successful. I'll communicate a degree of fluency through my combined knowledge, not through my monolingual knowledge of two separate codes, but by putting them together. That's how I'm going to express myself most effectively, efficiently, quickly, and best. Okay, and the third shift I'd like to identify, own language used to be seen as an obstacle. It would get in the way of language learning. Now, globally, it's seen as a resource. And in our case, with Spanish, one of the 10 closest to English, it's an absolute asset. It's a real advantage. And we're ever more focused on the power of positive transfer. Own language is, if you like, another quotation, the greatest pedagogical resource a learner brings to foreign language learning, as it lays the foundations for all other languages we might want to learn. So you can ask students to forget Spanish and to think in English and all of those things, but actually the mother tongue is always going to be there. The only way to stop students translating is to cut off their heads. It's a language acquisition support system. Everybody will translate. And our problem has been when they start to verbalize too much Spanish in the classroom. And I agree that's a problem. But we can't deny the essential need for them to make those contrast connections and so on. Look at these huge advantages if the teacher knows Spanish. I'll just put them up quickly. As a successful learner of English, you're an ideal model. You're demonstrating what's possible. You have far more insight into how the students will perceive of the language, how the language works, where you can contrast, where to accelerate, where to anticipate, and so on. Of course, you have local cultural knowledge, and both about the school, about learning styles, and so on. You can understand the students' feelings because you've done it yourself. You can relate to what they're thinking and probably more easily understand, at least guess what they're trying to express. You can use appropriate translation techniques, and I'm ever more in favor of translation, done carefully, and I'll show you some examples at the end, to understand and explain, particularly when there's a conflict, for example, the present perfect. And the key issue is, if you make reference to Spanish, you don't need to say a word in Spanish. And this is where the mythology, I think, has led us in the wrong direction. The idea that if you talk about Spanish, you have to begin to deliver Spanish, but that's not true. If you can talk about Spanish, around Spanish, without actually having to use a lot of Spanish. You can make reference, you can contrast, you can translate without actually having to say anything. And I'll demonstrate this later. Back to you guys again. So what is your definition of fluency? What is successful fluency? What is being fluent in a foreign language? Is it speaking without hesitation? Is it speaking quickly? Is it sounding like an Irish person? What is fluency? Again, I would normally ask you to give definitions, but perhaps just I'll jump in. But you know what you think. When the students say, "¿Qué quiere decir fluency? ¿Cómo voy a ser fluente en inglés?" What would your standard answer be? What do I have to do? Okay, and here just to say some. Sorry, have you got some answers, Andrew?
I don't know. I was going to say what teachers are saying. Let's see what teachers say.
Yes,
some teachers are saying the ability to communicate without hesitation.
It's not really about speed. I'm hesitating a lot. I'm pausing a lot, but I think I'm quite fluent. I'm pausing to give you time to accommodate and think about and reflect on what I'm saying. My pauses are quite deliberate. I'm probably slightly nervous, so I'm pausing more than I would. But you can see that I'm pausing to give you time to assimilate my language. So
another teacher saying, Paul, that fluency is thinking in English, speaking clearly. Someone else is saying conveying a message.
Good. That's the one I'd like to pick up on, because that is exactly what I think too. It's the ability to communicate an intended message. It's to get the listener affected as you wish. In other words, to get your message received more or less as you intended it. So it's all about communicative intention. Has my message been understood by the listener? If it has, I've been fluent, I've been successful. Yes, speed, yes, delivery, yes, but I don't really think it's thinking in English, because I'm not even sure if you do think in language at all, but that's a topic for another day. So that's what students need to know. It's all about getting your message across. And you can do it in all sorts of ways. You don't need a lot of words to get a message across, do you? Okay? Etc. With one or two words, you can express an awful lot. And this is it. So often I've said to my students, are you Colombian? And they say, yes, teacher. I say, no. Make a sentence. Yes, we are. And I'm dragging them back to the verb to be, rather than celebrating the successful communication. Are you Colombian? Yes, good. You understood my question. Most teachers say, no. Yes, we are, forcing them back to the accurate use of the verb to be, rather than celebrating first the fact that the message was received, understood, and the communication was successful. And if I could go back in time and start teaching again, this make a sentence thing, really it comes from sort of picking out details, mistake with preposition, mistake with article, or thinking about written English rather than actually spoken English. So whenever the students have successfully communicated intended messages, sent and received, we should celebrate before we start correcting. Otherwise, they miss the point that fluency is critical. Here's an example of something I do a lot with the students. You can use one word, two words, whatever you like, but I want you to have a conversation along these lines. Happy? Yes. Sure? Well. Problems? Yes. What? Oh, please. You understood that. That was an effective conversation. And I get my students to do this whenever I can, just with one word or two words or three, to forget sentences, but just have a ping pong, a communication. Football tonight? No. Colombia win? No. Etc. You don't need all this, or did you? You don't need to make a sentence all the time, because otherwise you're getting lost in the detail rather than the big picture, which is successful communication. I think this is the way to get students to believe in themselves much more as fluent users of limited English. So we go back to my question, and we've looked at those two. You mentioned, some of you, emotions, fear, and so on, lack of self-belief, or when we just say to low-level students, discuss. This makes me laugh. Whenever I see an elementary course book which says discuss, I throw it away, because they clearly cannot discuss. They may be able to express an opinion, they may be able to agree or disagree, but discussing in A1, I don't think so. But all too often it's there, and it's intimidating for our students. Or it's no vale la pena, because the test is all about accuracy, or the teaching or the methodology focuses more on making sentences rather than effective communication. Or perhaps back to the problems of international methodology rather than local methodology, aiming for native speaker-like, which is way above the aspirations of most students, failing to take full advantage of what they know. And above all, I think a lot of what we do or have done is making it much harder than it needs to be to get going, to reach up to a B1 level. I hope that makes sense. So this is something I do. A lot of teachers use a lot of Spanish in the classroom, and particularly for instructions with teenage classes, for example. And I've long argued you don't need to use Spanish yourself as a teacher if you choose the right English. If you say to students, go on, do you understand the activity? Go on. They say, go where, teacher? Where is on, teacher? And very quickly you learn to say continue, and they continue. Why should you say go on? Give me one reason why you should say go on when they don't understand. Yes, they need to understand go on, but not at the beginning. What they need to do above all is to continue. Okay, so there are some examples. If you choose comprehensible English, cognate heavy English, the students will understand you. and you don't need to make it more difficult than it is. And I think for years and years and years, we've made it far too difficult for students by trying to sound too native-like too soon. They can accommodate phrasal verbs once they've got a base. But if you put in too much native stuff right at the beginning, you're making it unnecessarily difficult for the students. Okay, so I hope that was useful. So whenever you find colleagues, I'll go back again, sorry. Whenever you find colleagues who are using a lot of Spanish to give instructions and stuff, then just simply say, hey, try and demonstrate to them, try and help them. Say, if you say, today we're going to make up some stuff. Make up some stuff. Make up, teacher? What are you talking about, teacher? But if you say, let's create a document, if you slow down, let's create a document, and then once they've got the message, say it more naturally, let's create a document. And even then, if you want to, we're going to make up some stuff to put the two together. But if you say make up some stuff first, you're making it unnecessarily difficult. And in the past, that's what I tried to do, trying to sound native-like all the time. And many Latinos, I think, almost torture their students, not deliberately, but because they're trying to speak such good English themselves, they forget about the fact that A1, A2, B1 and B2 need quite different input, appropriate input, which is replicable by the students. And if you put this poster on the wall, if you're lucky enough to have a classroom in the future, then you can say, this is the language I'm using to instruct you. You can use these verbs too. As I say, this is for A1 and A2. Once you get to B1, you can phrasal verb all day long. But if you do it too much before then, I think you're making it too difficult, unnecessarily difficult. Another question for you. Globally, how many people in the world use English? How many billion do you think? And then how many use Romance languages? Again, just a second or two for you to think about that. Maybe you'd like to type in the answers. I don't know the exact number, but I know what the literature's saying, what the British Council's saying. For English, it is about 2 billion use English as a first language, second language, third language, or foreign language. Okay, far fewer native speakers than non-native speakers. I think it's 3 to 1, they're outnumbered. So a lot more non-native speakers than native speakers. So non-native English for communicative purposes is much more common than native English. Not in movies, not in series and so on the TV, but globally, face to face, when your students are actually trying to work with English, they're going to meet more non-native users than native. And this is the interesting part. A lot of you are probably looking at what I'm saying, thinking it's not natural to teach continue before go on. Well, just think twice, because if you've got at least 1.5 billion Romance language users, and there are the statistics which come from Wikipedia. We know how reliable Wikipedia is, but these I have checked these in various sources. It's about 1.5 billion, so it's not so far away. It's almost as many Romance language users as English users. And of course, the common ground between the two is very, very useful. So which do you think is more likely to be understood by a German, by a Norwegian, by a Brazilian, for example? Continue or go on? When you listen to international English conversations at conference and stuff, not that many people, apart from the highly skilled linguists, are using the complex phrasal forms. Most people are using a more formal English, the type of English which is taught at universities, on business courses and so on. The type of English which you discover as you go higher up, you find so many words which are similar, which were hidden from you before. And there's an example for you. If a Colombian and a Brazilian were to speak, what language would they speak? Would they try and speak in English and Spanish? Sorry, would they try and speak Spanish and Portuguese, or would they try and speak English? They try and speak English, I suspect. And if they do try and speak together, then surely it's the Romance language forms which are going to be the most useful, just as one example. And it's the same across the globe, I believe. So what price native English? Why should we be so obsessed with that? Yes, if you're teaching bilingual children, it's different because they can absorb language. But teens and adults translate everything, and they want to be themselves as fast as possible. They don't care about a few mistakes. If they want to be fluent, mistakes are not the most important thing. Think about phrasal verbs again. Which do you teach first? Would you teach blow up or explode? Most international course books would teach blow up, bring on, before explode or cause. But if the students say, Profe, ¿qué quiere decir blow up? What would you say? The first thing you'd say probably is explode. Okay, and they can understand explode. So why don't we reverse this? Why don't we teach explode first and then bring in blow up when they're actually able to use phrasal verbs, which is B1 plus? All too often, students are drowning in complex phrasal verbs in A2 levels, and I just think it's so unnecessary, because if they're going to get higher, they will get higher with useful forms. They will be able to express themselves better, and then once they're flying in English already, you can throw in whatever you like, but we can kill their confidence by drowning them in what is complex and extremely difficult. There's some more examples there. So if we use the form on the right to explain the phrasal form, why don't we simply reverse the process generally, not in authentic songs or authentic takes? Don't kill them altogether, but don't force production of what is difficult when they have a viable alternative already. What's the most important teacher quality of all? What do you think? Is it to be bald and old like me, or to be good looking like you, or to be a great dancer, or to be rich, well paid, happy? What the research suggests is that it's empathy. Putting ourselves in the shoes and to be able to see things from the students' perspectives. And as a Spanish speaker, you have linguistic empathy. You can make choices which make it easy or difficult. It's up to you. But my feeling is most students would welcome the opportunity to have it easier at the beginning, so they gain some degree of confidence, and then bring in the complex without killing their motivation. So we have linguistic empathy. International approaches to teaching English do not have linguistic empathy, because they deny or they fail to take advantage of what our students already have. What's wrong with contrasting languages? This think in English idea, keep calm, don't translate. And I found a website the other day, how I started thinking in English. I wondered if she had a brain transplant. Anyway, there's no research to support banning classroom translation. Prohibition has never been proven. There's no research at all. So why do we ban it when we know students will do it? Because we don't want them to speak Spanish. So let's find an alternative rather than asking them to do the impossible. New knowledge is constructed on the basis of existing knowledge. Fact. So a second language will always be constructed on and around the mother tongue. Ignoring this denies learners a valuable resource, and it makes learning the second language unnecessarily laborious. These quotations come from Scott Thornbury. Learners will use translation, even if covertly, as a strategy for making sense of L2. So it makes much more sense to use it openly as an overt tool. And this is, sorry, my PowerPoint's gone a little silly. Contrast is a time-efficient way to convey meaning. Okay, experts like Penny Orr argue that you should be using translation to teach vocabulary throughout language learning, and who am I to disagree with her? But contrast is the key thing, because the students are always comparing. This is what I know, this is what I'm trying to learn. Are they similar? Are they different? Do they support each other? Is there a conflict? Etc., etc., etc. And noticing. Dick Schmidt, since the 90s, we're all trying to help students notice. Is there a better way to notice than contrast? Any questions? I'll pause for a second and see if there's any questions coming through. Or perhaps I'll keep going. And then, Andres, you interrupt me if there are any questions which teachers have at the moment.
I will.
Okay. So
there's a question somehow related to what you're mentioning. And it says, let me see. Alberto from El Salvador.
Yeah. Hello.
How can we motivate students to be more fluent in online classes? He says teaching online is challenging.
Yeah, of course.
To, of course, motivate our students to be more fluent, or helping them be more fluent, becomes a challenge.
Well, I think the first thing is to every time they're successful in getting their message across to you, celebrate. Well done, good, that's great. I really understood you. Yes, you made your point. Just keep rewarding success, first of all. Secondly, I would say don't jump so much on errors, because if you keep jumping on errors, students think that the mistake is more important than the successful communication. That's two quick things. The online classes that I've witnessed and I've given, it's very hard not to notice mistakes, but I think we must sort of celebrate before we go chasing detail. Otherwise, we get lost in the detail and we forget that the big picture is the students want to be understood. Of course, they want to be correct, but if they had to choose, do I want to be understood or do I want to be correct? Realistically, they've got much more chance of being understood than they have of being correct again and again. And what is correct anyway, particularly in terms, for example, of pronunciation, which you mentioned at the beginning. I mean, what pronunciation model do you want? They'll never sound native-like unless they live in the States, etc. So what do we realistically, I mean, if they're comprehensible, and I make that clear to my students, when you're successful, I will celebrate with you. If there is a problem, allow me to choose when and where to deal with it, okay? But if you keep jumping on anything that's not quite right, you're going to slow things down enormously and frustrate, and then they won't volunteer any degree of fluency. In a nutshell, that's my quick answer.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I hope that's useful. But I mean, it's hard as a teacher, isn't it? Because mistakes are almost sort of organic and they're sort of jumping up and they're saying, come on, teacher, kill me. And it's very hard to avoid them. But we do need to listen to the message. If you're not listening to the message, would a Chinese English speaker or an Arabic English speaker, would they be able to understand that? That should be your measure of success. Not necessarily would another Spanish speaker understand it, but would somebody of another nationality be able to receive that message with an acceptable level of comprehension? Really, if you're talking about English as a lingua franca, which we are, then my feeling is that's the way to go. I hope that's useful.
Thank you very much, Paul. And there's another question that is related to fluency, and which strategies can we share with teachers who are attending this session so they can help their students improve fluency or do activities outside the classroom to improve fluency?
I'm going to show you quite a few towards the end of the session.
Perfect.
Some translation activities too. I mean, in the end, it comes down to sort of recordings, making recordings. You need to witness your own fluency. If you say something and the teacher's understood, you feel good. If you want to then record it and look back on it yourself and you say, wow, that was okay. Yes, I made some mistakes. I mean, I think it's you know when you've been understood. You know when you haven't been understood. We need to flag for them the successes and help them through the worst excesses of their failures. It may be pronunciation, it may be articles, it may be prepositions, or it may just be spending a little bit more time practicing elements that they're studying. But I personally, I think with the technology we have now, it's recordings must be the way to go. Students recording, hearing themselves and polishing themselves. Of course, they can exchange it with colleagues, with peers, or with the teacher. But in the end, you need to witness your own fluency to believe in yourself as an English or any language user. I'll go on otherwise I'm going to get stuck and you won't see those examples. What's the best way to reduce errors? I know we're talking about errors. My feeling is not to jump on them all the time. It's the opposite. It's actually to anticipate them. When teachers plan a lesson, when you look at a text, how do you decide what to emphasize, where to emphasize? How do you decide the degree of difficulty? It's usually what's the degree of familiarity of the vocabulary, how many difficult new words, how many difficult structures, how many difficult concepts there are. And how do you measure them? It's probably because of your knowledge of Spanish. But these words are very similar to Spanish, they'll manage. These words are very different from Spanish, it's going to be very difficult for them. So we anticipate all the time, but I think we need to do it more overtly, as Scott Thornbury says. I like to begin like this. If I'm teaching a low-level class age, I'll put that on the screen at the beginning of the class. If I'm doing a present perfect class, I'll give them a few examples on the screen corrected. So as students come to class, what they see is that. And of course, they make the contrast between the two. They see what would happen if they translate it, and they see the correct form, and it leads them immediately towards success. I'm not verbalizing any Spanish. I'm just helping them to contrast. And I think the best tip I can give you is that if you think of translation as a form of contrast rather than a crime, then you're going to make more progress along this avenue. This is what I do. If I'm teaching the superlatives, I'll put examples like that. Whatever I'm teaching, and you can see that you can simply contextualize it by putting up anticipated mistakes on the screen as students come in and work out the sound and get their cameras working. And immediately you can see the context of the class, you know what to avoid, and it helps you have a degree of confidence right from the beginning of the class. It's much more effective, I think, than waiting until they make the mistake and then starting to correct, because they can anticipate mistakes much the same as we do when we're planning our lessons. There are huge advantages for this. The mental contrast, not the verbal contrast. The mental contrast gives them the context. They can imagine themselves saying the language. It accelerates comprehension. You don't need to spend hours presenting. It gives much more time for practice. I think most language classes, there's far too much presentation and not enough practice. If we can get the presentation phase over more quickly, you'll generate more practice and obviously greater fluency. It's democratic. Whenever you elicit the strong student volunteer by showing them what to avoid at the beginning, everybody, even the weakest student, gets the message. It accelerates both accuracy and fluency. It saves embarrassment, increases confidence and autonomy. The students feel intelligent. They can help each other. It's all advantages. And I haven't finished yet. There are more. It's highly motivating. There are some more examples down the bottom there. It plays to the bilingual teacher's strengths. Denying contrast can confuse, frustrate, mislead, delay, and decelerate classroom learning. I've been guilty of this for years. I used to say to my students, don't use the mother tongue. No Spanish, no Portuguese, no Arabic, wherever I was teaching. Stick in English, only English. And of course, that doesn't nurture fluency at all, does it? It's waiting for accuracy as opposed to nurturing fluency. Particularly online, it can take much, much longer. If you're asking students to go through a text 3 times just to extract the grammar, you're killing the text and taking far too long to make your point. So personally, I'm quite anti-inductive approaches until a much higher level. All too often, we use the same inductive approach right at the beginning with students and things take too long. Nobody has to verbalize anything. There's the message, got the message, good, let's go, let's practice, let's get fluent. So it reduces the need for any Spanish. You make the contrast point right at the beginning, it saves you an awful lot of time. It gives greater confidence, particularly to the weaker students. So this is what I'm suggesting: compare, notice, focus, and practice. I'm not suggesting it's a new method, but what I'm doing is, rather than denying the inevitable, everybody will translate. It just may be a microsecond flash, but it will happen. You cannot stop it. So if you keep saying don't, you're running against the wind. What you need to do is do it efficiently so that we can get on with the key elements of practice. If you're interested in this, I've written a quite a long article for a magazine. They just take a screenshot, you've got the reference, or I'm sure I can share this with Andresa afterwards. I've called it inductive, deductive, or seductive. And obviously, being Latinos, the seductive approach should appeal to you more. Okay, I'll move on because that's very well explained in that article, which is free. Question for you: which develops first in language learning? Fluency or accuracy? Quickly type in F or A, just in the chat box, put F or A, F or A, F or A, according to your answers, and we'll see which is coming through, more Fs or more As.
A lot of Fs.
A lot of Fs, good, because that's
Yes.
the right answer. Let me demonstrate this with my own daughter. This is her 2 years ago. She's now 3. Yes. Can you believe at my age I have a 3-year-old child? Well, there you go.
Chocolate. O que você quer comer? More chocolate.
She'd never heard the word chocolate before. And that's how we learn a language. Somebody gave her a piece of chocolate I never had for 2 years. What a cruel father. And a friend of ours gave her a chocolate biscuit. And as soon as she had it, she was chocolate, chocolate, chocolate. She was desperate to say the word. And that's what happens. You express it, and then you say things, and through practice and polishing, you say them better. So fluency comes first. And here are a couple of quotations you can read through just to justify what I'm saying. Whatever you do, accuracy will come last. So fluency will come first, and a lot of our tactics in the past have actually, I think, worked against this. Rather than encourage fluency, we've tried to sort of put accuracy first. And actually, to me, accuracy is just one element of fluency. I don't think of them as separate things. I think of accuracy as part of fluency. Out of fluency comes accuracy. Learning is prompted and refined by the need to communicate. And once they're speaking, we can polish. That's the whole trick. So this is my early fluency approach. This is what I've been doing for years and years, right across Latin America, from Mexico right down to Chile. If you read through that, you'll see what I'm saying. All of that I've said, and then let's add to that. It builds confidence right from the beginning. I showed you how I can get beginners speaking in one class, expressing opinions, and also it aids development of fluent listening and consistent, relevant help with pronunciation and spelling. After all, what are Spanish speakers' areas of greatest difficulty? What would you say they are? Which skills, which elements of language are the most difficult for Spanish speakers? Some of you already said pronunciation. There's the answer. I would say listening, speaking fluently, pronunciation, writing, and spelling. And if you're focusing primarily on grammar and vocabulary, you're not really tailoring your approach to Spanish speakers' most urgent needs. Their greatest difficulties are there. So really we need a course with lots of listening, speaking, pronunciation, writing, and spelling to help them get through what's hardest, and give them a lot of international cognate type words to give them the fluency to get going, as I've suggested. What I do with audio scripts, when you turn to the back of a course book or look at an audio script, it doesn't help you with pronunciation at all. What I've done is I've put a pronunciation activity onto every audio script. So here you've got and Most course books teach monkey, nose, with the initial and pronunciation problems, which is not an issue for our students. Our students, Spanish speakers, have problems with and at the end of words. And so I'm focusing on that. Here, welcome, telephone, and students say, why isn't it welcome? Why isn't it telefone? And I show them that NE and N, or ME and M at the end of words have different spellings, but the same pronunciation. Students are delighted to discover these things. Normally, we just assume them, but it's important to focus on them. Or sentence stress and weak forms. You can see there in bold, I've highlighted the sentence stress and reduced the font for the weak forms, so they can see that there were too many exams. There were too many exams. They can see the stress. I'm trying to give visual help with pronunciation. This is fantastic for online teaching because the students, of course, can do this for themselves at home. They can listen again, pick out and imitate pronunciation whenever they want to, look for spelling patterns, and the answers are all there. It's freestanding, it's all there. And in the audio scripts, you can see the ingredients, just about every ingredient. I'm trying to teach the phonology of listening by focusing on features of pronunciation. And it's all done for you in English ID. Ching. Another example, which I'll move on because there are 84 activities like this just in one level. So far more pronunciation than any other course. Why? Because that's what Spanish speakers need. You yourself said it right at the beginning. So often we skip the pronunciation in course books because it's L and R. And for Asian students, it's not relevant to us. And every time we skip pronunciation, we're sending the message to students that it's not important when we know it's a key element for our students. I've also got a system of teaching pronunciation, focusing on sounds. Rhyming pictures, 3, tree, e, 6, mix, book, cook, shoe, 2. So 2 words for each sound. Rhyming pairs, bananas, pajamas, skirt, shirt, etc. But what I've done is this. marked it for Spanish and Portuguese speakers for the whole of Latin America, Brazil included. If you speak Spanish or Portuguese, E, the first one, is easy, but the I is difficult, because they lengthen the I. So it says, if you can see there, S and P. So you only need to focus on the sounds which are difficult because they don't exist in your language. And of course, the majority you don't need to worry too much about because they're easy. So again, the students can see where to focus and where to celebrate. And I often do this for online teaching. I just put the chart up. If you're a user of the material, you can put the chart up at the beginning and the students can drill themselves, just looking at the words to try and remember. Pen, 10, man, fan, sun, run, diphthongs, ear, beer, plane, train, etc., etc. What I would do now, and this is what I urge you to do if you're teaching online, is to challenge the students on visuals. I've just shown you 32 words. I wonder how many of the words you can remember. Obviously, I'm going too quickly because we're short of time. But whenever you've got some images, what I do is flash it up, take it away, set a challenge, and get the students. That's how I get my students fluent. But like ear, beer, plane, train, take it away, ooh, 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 and then having to remember, then come back. And that making teaching game-like for online teaching seems to me an obvious way to go. I also do this with picture dictionary type pages. We have 400 illustrated words in every level. Just watch, if you look at the line there, I just play with the, going back, just play by covering things up, giving them half the word, a little bit of the word, and so on. Playing, which I'm going too quickly for you. As students arrive, just put things up, cover half the word, cover little bits of the word, get them to complete the words, give them the will to volunteer. Somebody asked earlier about fluency. Having students want to volunteer by giving sufficient clues is a great way of bringing words from their mouths. That type of thing. And then, of course, focusing on spelling. You can see there I've got all sorts of work on spelling with the chart. Every sound I've given examples of the key ways to spell it. I mean, how much help do we really give teens and adults generally with spelling? We focus on endings, but again, it's not really their problem. It's the combinations which produce the same sounds, which causes the problem for Spanish speakers. So I'm suggesting that we should keep grouping words to sensitize learners to the main sounds and spellings and rhyme relationships in English. And of course, I do a lot of this. I always have. I'm very fond of pronunciation teaching. Okay, and then I could just say, again, the same sort of thing. What did I just say about grouping? Can you remember? So that's how I teach online. Don't worry, I don't want you to do it. We don't have time. Life is too short. But if you keep flashing things up, take them away. Flash them up, take them away. Have students in breakout rooms. That's what I said. And students can paraphrase in breakout rooms, chat box, flash, put back, half show. Encouraging them just to complete words. Show the stress so they can guess the pronunciation. All of those things. That's how I teach online, to make it much more game-like. A lot of online teaching is very, very dry because you just go through the material. But if you flash it up, reduce the task, cover half the text, and so on, reveal a little bit at a time, you'll get the students saying more. Obviously online, in the new edition, I'm going to show you, in the new edition, we've got all of this on the digital platform. Here's the consonants, but students can record themselves. I won't show you this because time is, we've got video, of course, like everybody else. Everything is personalized. Every lesson has one or two make it personal phases when the students try to get fluent talking about themselves. And the activities we've chosen are appropriate for monolingual classes. Not a lot of the activities which you find in course books are designed for international students, but they don't work so well when everybody comes from the same city. Okay, and these are some of the features which you can get in the second edition if you're interested in looking at the material. Here's a song for you. I want you to listen for, see how many of these questions you can remember. Why don't you run from me? Sorry, I don't. What do you want? Go. What do you want from me? Why don't you run? Exactly the same process. With songs, I do the same thing. Give them the thing, then take it away, and immediately the students have to try and remember it. And I use an extract from songs every lesson. I can't remember a lesson now or a talk that I've given without using some musical element to reinforce the language, because they're wonderful things and they're universal. And of course, I get the students very quickly volunteering extracts from songs. I never use whole songs. I always use extracts because life is too short, and you can always go away and see the rest of the song online for yourself if you want to. And there is some different activities you could do with that lovely thing. I use that to teach, obviously, question formation and the auxiliaries, which are so difficult for our students. You can see the potential of that, isn't it lovely? It's great for teaching useful auxiliaries in questions. Okay, so what I'm saying, again, in English ID uniquely, I use a famous song line in every lesson. There are some there which you recognize: Coldplay, Frank Sinatra, Lady Gaga, Britney Spears, One Republic. They're hugely, hugely wonderful things. They provide accessible, authentic English every lesson. I use them to illustrate an aspect of language. There's a puzzle. The students always have to find a connection with the song. It's a hook for the lesson. Karaoke is probably the best pronunciation activity. Obviously, you can sing whenever you want to with the students. And I've always said that karaoke is the best pronunciation activity. It's when you get the nearest to perfect pronunciation. It's an organic feature because students can find alternatives that fit the lesson. They can go and find a better or worse version of the extract. And of course, they can suggest songs of their own, which connect to the language you're focusing on, whether it's a tense, an item of vocabulary, a topic, or whatever. And it's so wonderful when the students start teaching. I have thousands of extracts which my students have given me, which I can bring out and use in different ways in lessons. And in the teacher's book, I explain exactly how to use it. Here's another example for you. Just looking at translation now, because I'm teaching online, it's ridiculous to deny translation because the students are Googling words, looking things up all the time. So we need to work with translation in more interesting ways. Here's an example with a song. Students to translate the song, and they can do it with Google, I don't mind. And then there's the translation. That's what happens when you put that text into Google Translate, you get that, which is pretty good, isn't it? And that's what I'm finding more and more, that Google Translate is ever more of a friend to me. It's a really good starting point for weaker students, for example. If you've got very weak students and you're using a course book, just ask them to put the text into Google Translate before the lesson. And it helps them if they put it through Google Translate and then back again, back into to English, going through Spanish, they can see immediately where some of the problems lie. And of course, they'll pick up language and at least understand the general idea of the text before the class. Okay, then I asked them to focus on the differences. How many words in English? 28. How many in Spanish? Unusually, there are the same number of words in Spanish. Generally, there are fewer words in Spanish, as you know. And then I asked the students to highlight the differences. There it is. So, así que. So there's 2 words in Spanish, 1 in English. That's one of the extra ones. And you can see it's so, up, it's, I'm, más, a mí mismo, etc., etc. So just looking at the differences here, you don't need to verbalize it if you don't want to, but just looking and comparing, it gives you all that noticing, that extra information about language. And it's in the fun context of music. And then another day, your reverse translation, asking students to then another day put it back, really forces you to notice. Let me show you what I mean. So another day, show them the text in Spanish. You don't need to speak Spanish to do so. And then ask them to fill the gaps on a reverse translation. And of course, by this time, they've virtually memorized it and they've got a lovely chunk of language. So I use Spanish ever more in interesting ways now I'm online teaching, particularly for homework activities. Many of these activities you can do at home. I'm aware of the time. I'll finish in 5 more minutes, Andres, if people are happy to hang in. Otherwise, I could just send it to you. Are people happy to take 5 more minutes? There's a few more interesting activities to come along.
Sure, Paul. We can have 5 more minutes, and then there's some questions that teachers would like to ask you.
Brilliant. Good. Okay. I'm happy to stay here as long as you like until I fall asleep. Translation is the vital skill of negotiating between languages. It's actually the 5th skill. We've got listening, speaking, reading, writing, and many people think of translation as the 5th skill. If you're into translation, as I increasingly am, that book, Translation and Own Language Activities by Philip Kerr, is wonderful. It's a chocolate box of activities which you can use. And because now we're in a very different teaching situation, it's one thing to say no Spanish in the classroom. It's quite another to say no Spanish when you are surrounded by Spanish at home. If you want to see what I've done with the songs, if you just go to Spotify and search for Paul Seligson's ID playlist, you can find all 350 plus songs that I use. Remember, I only use extracts. There you'll find the whole song. But you could use that if you wanted to put the sound to the extracts I've chosen. Happy Christmas. And there's what I suggest, if you look at the back of the teacher's book, there's a complete methodology for using songs. That's Adele's most famous song. I use it to teach the third person S. And you can see the procedure. All of this is at the back of the teacher's book. There are at least 40 different ways of exploiting song extracts at each level. As I say, trying to prohibit or ignore Spanish is crazy when the students are at home and they've got access to so many digital resources, and they're still going to be translating anyway. So what I just wanted to finish with a few ideas perhaps to help you get thinking about ways to better use translation. All of your students have a bilingual dictionary in the phone. Everybody else in the family is speaking Spanish. It's very hard to think in English, even more so outside the classroom. So I think it's important to help build connections, getting them to guess. When they see a word, try and guess the pronunciation, try and guess what the equivalent might be in English of a Spanish word. Try to anglicize suffix patterns. We need to train them in using bilingual resources, apps. Vagalume is how I learn songs. My wife's Brazilian, and I'm learning Portuguese all the time, and I use Vagalume because it has bilingual texts for all the contemporary songs between English and Portuguese. So by working between the English and Portuguese translations of songs, both Portuguese songs and English songs, I learn a lot of language. Every time students want to say something which they can't, ask them to self-diagnose, Google it, and bring it to the next class. Preparing for text, as I said before, putting text through Google can only be beneficial, I think, to students. It's unlikely to trap them. And it's ever better now. It's using artificial intelligence. It's getting much, much better. It's a much more reliable friend than it used to be. Those of you who remember 15 years ago when we hated correcting translated online translations. Parallel readers, bilingual text, anything like that must be a useful thing. Building their own phrase books, classroom language, may I go outside teacher and so on. That type of thing clearly needs to be adjusted for online teaching. But all of these things I've done with my students, online language, proverbs, quotations, etc. I'm particularly keen on phrase books, which I'll show you in a second. Here, for example, something you can do easily on online teaching if you want to get students more fluent is any exercise that you're doing with them, if you put a frame on the screen. So if they're working in breakout rooms, or if they're lucky enough to be working with a buddy live, then try to imagine before the class the language you think they're going to need to do the activity in English, because they won't get fluent, they won't stay in English very easily without the teacher there to sort of whip them along. But if you've put a frame on the board, then the students at least have some hope of using English because you've led them towards the sort of things that you want them to say. So again, going back to your question about how to get students fluent in online teaching, the obvious thing to do is to put frames of language to do whatever the activity might be, whether it's true, false, or perhaps even a discussion activity. At least put up some useful phrases. The same with online. I'm building at the moment an online phrase book. The most common thing is, can you hear me? Turn on your mic and so on. We all know the language you need. But again, if you put this up at the beginning of a class, when you're getting everybody online and together, if you just give them a frame, you'll help them to stay in English for these checking procedures, and they'll pick up a lot of language. So I think bilingual phrase books and asking students to contribute, Google in Spanish what you want to say in English, get the translation, bring it to class, contribute and add it to our collective phrase book. So just to summarize, I hope if you've not heard of ID before, then it really is a remarkably successful project. It's now in its second edition. It's different in the ways I've suggested, but it's similar in terms of grammar, language progression. We teach the most common language, the same as everybody else, but we add to that all the cognates and free gifts, Happy Christmas, which students can access very easily as Spanish speakers. It's got a wonderful learning platform, and as Andres said at the beginning, it's now completely digitalized, both the e-workbook and the students' book. But uniquely, it's designed to meet the real needs of our students. Why have I done this? Because I adore Latin America. It's my second home. And I can't believe that the publishers will produce books for Poland and for Turkey and for Greece, but not for Latin America. It's, as ever, Latin America is sort of at the bottom of the pile. And that's why I've done this. It's been an act of love for me. I hope you find it useful. I look forward to answering your questions. I'll wrap up there for now, and then we'll go back to whatever questions you have. Thank you so much for aguantating me. I apologize for rushing through some of it, but I've tried to give you as much as I can. Enjoy your teaching, because if you don't, who will? Latin America, I love you. I miss you. I miss you so much. It hurts. Any questions?
Well, thank you very much, Paul. Very interesting and powerful session with a lot of great ideas. A nice hat, by the way.
Just for you, Andrew, just for you.
Great. Also invite teachers to check English ID and Identities, fully digitalized courses. Now we have their second editions that are part of Richmond Solution, a more comprehensive solution for those schools that want to intensify their English language programs or become bilingual. So I invite you to check for more information on our website, richmondweek.com, and also a lot of research that you can download there. So, Paul, let's go to the questions. There's a teacher, let me see right here, Brian Vallejo. He's asking us, how can we balance the teaching of the components? You talked about vocabulary, but there is a concern about grammar and fluency, and there is a huge focus sometimes on grammar rather than fluency. But of course, how can we balance fluency with grammar? A lot of teachers are saying grammar is the base, so we can teach our students fluency.
I love
what do you suggest? What's your opinion?
I adore grammar. I couldn't have taught for 40 years without grammar. It's like everything, it's a question of balance. And I think it's a recognition of the power of fluency. What is fluency? How does it work? If you accept that fluency comes first, then you need to learn to live with error. And my feeling is that if you can, the grammar problems your students have. When things will transfer easily or are much more complicated for Spanish speakers. All I suggest you do is just flag, if grammar's the key thing today, then put half a dozen examples of typical translation errors or errors you've collected over the previous month. Put them all up, corrected at the beginning of the class, and begin with this correction process. Begin with, this is wrong. This is what happens if you translate from Spanish. That's the correct form. That's the correct form. Don't try and extract it from text. Don't do loads and loads of exercises, which is pretty mundane generally. But try and just flag it. This is the problem. Let's find a solution. Just be honest about it. So this is what's going to go wrong unless you listen to me. This is what's going to go wrong if you keep thinking the Spanish way. What you need to do is accept that when you say this in Spanish, it's going to come out wrong. When you do it this way, it's going to come out right. So here are some models, then some practice, and then let's get into some fluency. So if grammar is your essence, then I've shown you what I do is I flag the issue right at the beginning. Even before they start talking, just put some examples on the screen for the first 5 minutes. Students never start on time. You don't need to have the camera on at the beginning. Just have the screen on with all the sort of typical errors. We've done this for years as teachers, collecting errors, and then begun the following class with these are the mistakes you made in the last class. With online teaching, or with English ID, or you've got all those common mistakes there anyway, put them at the front of your teaching, right at the beginning. And then clearly it's the most important thing because that's your priority. And then you'll get the grammar, you'll get the accuracy, but you'll have time for some fluency too. If you go through a text and it takes 20 minutes to make your point, most online classes, after 40 minutes, the students just want to escape. So I mean, if you're taking 20 minutes to make your point, then you're not going to get that balance, which we talked about at the beginning. To achieve the balance, you need to prioritize. Let's get this right, let's get this right, let's get this right. Don't do this, don't do this, do this, don't do this. Allow them to contrast, work it out for themselves. They don't need to verbalize it because you've made it clear what's going on. You know they will translate. And then give them a lot more time for practice. Teaching has always been presentation heavy. It's taken too long to make the point. What you need to do is, this is the point. Okay, guys, even if necessary, explaining. If you think about it economically, if you explain for 2 minutes in Spanish at the beginning, no hay que hacer esto, hay que... Okay, ¿se entiende? Yeah, okay, let's go. In a sense, you might be better off doing 2 minutes of Spanish, explaining everything right from the beginning to give yourself more time for practice, because it's the practice time that will generate the fluency, which really is the key thing. So that's how I would try and accommodate both. I love grammar. It gives me something to teach. I can always find a grammar mistake to chase. But in the end, why are we teaching English? It's as a code to express your personality. That's why I call my course English ID. You need to have an English identity. You need to like yourself in English. If you don't like your English identity, if you don't like the person you are in English, you'll never learn English. You'll reject it. You'll just simply push it away. You have to like yourself in the foreign language. And you can only do that if you're able to be yourself. How can you be yourself? By expressing yourself. Sorry,
Thank you very much.
Long answer, but you know me, once I start talking.
Very important question. One final question, Paul, and it's about large classes. A lot of teachers face large classes, have to work with large classes online. So which ideas can you give these teachers so they can work with their students to improve their fluency skills?
Well, I mean, ideally, study buddies, breakout rooms if you can, getting students to try and do most things together in pairs, short tasks, 1 question, 1 answer, celebrate. 2 questions, 2 answers, celebrate. Keep it short, because the larger the activity, the more the students will drift away. I mean, the key, I think, to teaching, so many activities are over ambitious for large classes. We know they're not going to stay in English. We know they're not going to achieve it. So my quick answer is a small amount of time, a short activity, and share as much as they possibly can. It's very hard when you've got 40 students. What I would do with 40 students, I think it's just an awful lot of research type things. Try and learn this, memorize this, learn chunks of language, a lot of memorization, a lot of phrase book type thing, just giving things that they can successfully say. The frameworks I've shown you are tremendously useful. If you on the screen, it shows them what they need to say to each other. Then the students can look, what do you think? I think it's this. Shall we ask the teacher? I'm a bit lost. Can I use a dictionary? Whatever phrases you need, try and just see it from the student's point of view. And it's not hard to type out half a dozen phrases, but if you give them a frame, even if they're alone at home, they can try and assimilate and memorize at least some of that language. I think all too often the students are left to do written exercises and there's nothing to say. And I think our job is to sort of force in language which they can use. And at least, even if they're alone in the middle of the countryside, participating in an online class, there's half a dozen phrases there which I think, I can try and use this. I can say this. I can begin to try and say this better. I can put it into Google Translate and hear it and compare my pronunciation. There's lots I can do for myself. And the teacher's only giving me a small amount of language to learn. It's feasible. I might be able to do it. When you say learn a huge thing or talk for 5 minutes, game over. It's not going to happen. So small, short, share.
Thank you very much, Paul. A lot of messages thanking you for such a wonderful presentation. Personally, I'd like to thank you for being with us this afternoon. I know that it's very, very late in England, so thanks
I'm
for your
time.
time.
I'm ready for bed.
You're right. Thank you very much, Paul.
Okay.
It was great to see you again. Hope to see you again soon.
Besos a todos los latinos. I can't wait to get back to your country. I really, honestly, you have no idea how much I miss Latin America. I can't wait.
Hopefully, you can come visit us soon. And don't forget, teachers, to check English ID and identities that are part of Richmond Solution for Schools. You already heard wonderful ideas and the way it is structured specifically for Latino students. So wonderful resources, wonderful tools. And I would also like to take this opportunity to invite you to be with us tomorrow. We have two wonderful presentations, one at 4 p.m. and one at 5 p.m. The one at 4 p.m. is Jimena Lizalde, Digital Competences for Innovation in Education. And we have Gadlin at 5 p.m. He's going to talk about designing learning-oriented assessments. Do not forget to go to our website, richmondweek.com, register, download a wonderful resource that we have there, and at 7 p.m. our bilingual edition of Ruta Maestra. So thank you all for being with us today. Thank you, Paul, for being this afternoon, talking about the Early Fluency method, and we'll see you tomorrow. Take care. Goodbye.
It has been a long road and full of challenges. Being bilingual on graduation day has been one of my greatest achievements because I now have the tool set to go on reaching all the objectives I might set for myself in the future. A world of opportunities opened up to me when I started studying with Richmond Solution. I was really able to learn autonomously. I could study at home, in the library, or in the classroom. I could dive into the book, or by being connected to the internet, I could explore fascinating activities that empowered my English skills. I was able to instantly access the answers as they were only a click away. I loved working in a team. My friends and I had great fun as we learned. I learned a lot from them, and I know that they learned something from me. The exams were always challenging, but thanks to the practice that was constantly available on the digital platforms, we were fully up to speed to meet these challenges. I am really going to miss my school.
Richmond Solution helped us hugely to transform the English program in our school. We have now got the best tools to guarantee the best learning. Let me show you. Part of the process gives us access to a coach who builds our confidence, as well as training courses to better our abilities and to continue our improvement. Yes, good teachers are always keen to learn more. As we live in the cloud, as we say in this connected world, we have digital resources to improve our classes and which allow our students to learn from anywhere in the world, even quite literally in the clouds if they are on board an airplane. Through the Richmond Test Manager and Learning Analytics, we have a variety of possibilities to test, validate, and monitor students' progress. It is amazing to be able to see how your students are learning and to have the evidence of their learning at your fingertips. This really does make us very happy indeed. Richmond Solution is a solution designed for you.